Welcome to the webinar today, Inside the FDA Peptide Meeting, what actually happened and what it means for your pharmacy. We were really excited to dive into this topic. It was much anticipated, this PCAC meeting. As you guys know, Dae was in the room, so we can't wait to pick his brain and see what's going on there. So my name's Nicolette Mathey, pharmacist, founder, and CEO of Atrium24. I love this stuff. We help pharmacies grow, we create technology, we watch what's happening in the industry. And so this is a really great time to be involved in the changes that are happening. And I have with me today our clinical director, Annie.
Yes, good to see everybody. So I am a pharmacist and the clinical director here. So obviously I've been following it very closely and excited about the results that we saw a few days ago and excited to hear everything Dae has to say.
Yeah. And speaking of Dae, I'll let you intro yourself.
Thanks, Nicolette. Nice to meet you, everybody. My name is Dae Lee. I'm a pharmacist, attorney, shareholder at Buchanan Ingersoll Rooney. I mainly represent independent pharmacies of all sizes, of all types, including compounding pharmacies. I also represent different stakeholders, ranging from manufacturers to self-funded employers in the pharmacy space.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you for your collaboration and your just willingness to break everything down for us and keep us on track. And this industry changes so rapidly. So without further ado, the agenda, we're going to talk a little bit in the beginning just to kind of give everybody a level set on the category system, FDA, kind of like what we're looking at and what is so interesting about what just happened in this meeting. Leading up to it, the changes that got us to where we are today, what the PCAC meeting means for our industry and for your pharmacy. And then we're going to talk about something really exciting that we've been cooking up that we're launching, and it's an actual peptide strategies training. So Annie, I'll kick it over to you because you've been in such a deep dive on this. You were anyway, and now especially in anticipation of this peptide market becoming even bigger and more regulated. So can you break down for us what this Section 503A is here and what can be compounded for our pharmacies on the call?
Yep. So there have been some pretty, set guidelines of what can be compounded by a 503A pharmacy. And the first option is that it's a component of an FDA approved drug. So we all know what those are. We know how to find those. Another option is it can be a subject of a USP or NF monograph. So there are some additional ones that have those monographs set. And then the third option is that it's on the FDA's bulk drug substances list. So that's where it gets a little bit nuanced because as you may or may not know, that bulk drug substances list is actually very short. So as we move to the next slide, you can see that is broken down further into categories. So this is the interim policy for drugs that have been nominated. So the three categories are category 1, which means it's under evaluation. And in that category, traditionally, the FDA has said that they will not implement any enforcement against pharmacies that are using those drugs to be compounded with. So that's where a lot of these peptides had lived previously. Category 2 is a list that represents safety issues that the FDA has pulled out. So if it is on category 2 of the nominations list, then typically the FDA can enforce that. So those are considered generally a no-go. And then there's category 3, which basically means that they were submitted for applications without significant evidence, or they were missing some pieces that they needed for proper evaluation. So you may see those again jump back on one or two later. And then historically, as we move to the next slide, we can kind of look at what got us here to begin with. So prior to 2023, there were a lot of very popularly compounded substances. So a lot of the ones that we just saw recently, BPC, things like that, were on category 1. So compounding pharmacies could compound those substances. So back in 2023, when those got pulled, it was kind of like a huge upset for the entire system. And several issues came about with that because a lot of patients were used to seeing these, were used to being able to get them from a compliant source, with good testing, C of A's, things like that. And when they were taken away, of course, the patients who loved these drugs did not stop using them. They just started getting them from an unregulated market, which turns into quite a dangerous situation, as we know, for injectable medications especially. So then recently, on the next slide, we can see, so in April, there was kind of another big turn, right, where these 12 very common ones were removed from category 2. So that was very exciting for us. Everyone was excited to see those pulled off. There was a little bit confusion there too of, well, now what happens? Can those be compounded? And, the answer was now we wait for PCAC to review. And then after PCAC reviews them, the FDA will take that into consideration. And then I think we'll have Dae talk about the potential of what that means, timelines, as we go on a little bit further.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's a great lead up, and just in looking back, what happened a few years ago and what happened recently, and especially since this April announcement, RFK probably famously now went on the Joe Rogan podcast earlier this year and, said that he's going to bring peptides back into the regulated channels and FDA is going to approve them. So yeah, there was a lot of big news going on. And now you can have access to all these peptides. Well, not so fast and still not now because this PCAC, this Pharmacy Compounding Advisory Committee, just met a couple days ago and they looked at the first 7 of these 12 peptides to see if that committee recommends that the FDA put them on the 503A bulks list. So that would give us an avenue, a channel to be able to compound these compliantly in our pharmacies again, but we're not there yet. So where does that leave us? And we'll bring Dae in. I can't wait to hear because you were there for all the different conversations and discussions and debates in that PCAC meeting these past couple business days. So, what happened? What's your take on it?
Yeah, so I was at the FDA campus in Silver Spring, Maryland last Thursday and Friday, July 23rd and 24th. The meeting started around like 8 a.m. I think the Thursday session ended after 6 p.m. It was all day heated debate meeting. Friday started around like 8 a.m., ended around like 4-ish, I think. Still heated. You know, there has been a lot of, amount of speculation online about what happened, what the votes mean, what this means for compounding pharmacies. Before we begin, though, I want to emphasize that the committee's vote does not change the current legal status of those peptides. I mean, they should remain unavailable for compounding until FDA completes the rulemaking process. Nothing occurred over the past 2 days or last week authorized pharmacists to begin compounding these ingredients like today or tomorrow. But the vote actually, provided us with glimpse into what the committee was thinking and why they recommended it, these peptides to be added to 503 bulk list. And, it will, form a basis of the FDA's decision, down the road. Importantly, FDA, usually follow the committee's recommendation. FDA, I want to say, went against the committee's recommendation on the rare occasions, but on a high stakes cases. So nobody knows what's going to happen. Nobody knows what the FDA is going to do. But in terms of the votes, the committee voted in favor. Committee reviewed 7 peptides over the course of 2 days. 4 peptides in day 1, 3 peptides in day 2. And they ultimately voted in favor of recommending placement of 6 of those 7 peptides on the 503A bulk list. And those peptides were BPC-157, KPV, TB-500, MOTC, epitolone, and lastly, CMAX. The lone exception was the amideltide. So I guess, by just looking at the votes and the peptides that they passed or they recommended to be added to the 503A bulk list, it may appear to be a significant victory for proponents of peptide compounding, but we shouldn't really overstate the voting. Okay, compounding pharmacies like 503As, they should not start compounding these peptides and then start dispensing it to the patient. And of course, there are pharmacies who have been doing this, meaning who have been compounding these peptides in their products and then dispense it to the patient. And those pharmacies may or may have not been subject to any FDA enforcement action, or may have not been subject to Board of Pharmacy enforcement action. The other thing that really surprised me the most was I thought the discussion was going to be entirely focusing on the clinical studies and clinical aspect of it. But what surprised me was like how much of discussion is centered around like public policy. There are several committee members openly acknowledge something everyone in the industry already knows, which is there's an enormous gray market, right? We can't ignore that. And the other thing that I wanted to point out is that there were committee members, and there were also non-voting committee members, and there were also temporary committee member who stepped in for amideltide, I want to say, who voted no to that. I mean, it's all because some of the committee members have potential conflict of interest involving those peptides. That's why they had a roster of committee members, and including voting and non-voting members. And going back to the gray market, we all know like people buy them online, like under the purview of research grade. Are they being enforced? And I think one of the committee member was actually asked, like, why isn't the FDA exercising its enforcement authority over those like online market sellers? And in simple terms, the committee member said they're not bound to. Well, they don't have any authority to enforce. Provide enforcement authority over those online marketers. So they acknowledge the gray market exists. So there was a lot of heated debate regarding or centered around should FDA add those peptides to 503A bulk list? Will that actually control the gray market? Will that actually push patients to more like reputable or providers with credentials, aka 503A pharmacies, rather than people just buying off online?
A couple of other things that I noticed too was I think the FDA also had stated at one point, kind of talking about enforcement and things like that, and they kind of just admitted that they're very overwhelmed and they don't have the resources to be evaluating everything they'd like to. So that kind of stood out. And another thing that stood out to me, and I'd like your take on it, Dae, was there seemed to be a misunderstanding of the requirements of drugs to be put on the bulk drug substances list. I think there was a committee member, who even stated like, well, if we add this to category 1, and they said, well, we're not saying if we're adding it to category 1, we're saying if we're going to take it and put it on the bulks list. And so even the committee members were kind of a little bit confused about that. And I think some of them were looking more towards, the differences between full FDA approval versus what the compounding list is. So those those things stood out to me. And I didn't know if that was kind of a surprise to you as well, that even the committee members weren't quite sure on the requirements of what they were voting on.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. So I attended along with three other attorneys from my firm. They're true, they're from the DC office, career FDA attorneys, and a lot of experience with the advisory committee meetings in the past as well. One of my colleagues made a comment that she thought that the committee members were underprepared, did not know what they were really talking about. And the way they presented the FDA also presented the slides or their presentation was just reading off of the slide. It doesn't really, it doesn't really. And I think one of the committee members said like he didn't know what he was voting on, which is
Yeah.
quite bizarre. And
Exactly.
then he
Yep.
stayed on as a voting member for, you know, on 7 peptides throughout the 2 days. And like you say, Annie, like several committee members like repeatedly emphasized that the standard for inclusion on the 503A bulk list is not the same as the same standard used for approval of a new drug. Completely different statutory framework. And then I want to say FDA like returned to concerns regarding incomplete characterization, insufficient safety data, inconsistent naming conventions, and limited efficacy evidence. I mean, of course, the committee member acknowledged those concerns, but at the same time, several members questioned whether the FDA was effectively applying a new drug approval standard to a bulk list determination. Like Congress never intended a 503A bulk list standard to be the same as new drug approval process, and that distinction matters. And I think the committee was trying to find a way to, I guess, alert the public that um, not enough safety studies, not enough efficacy studies, too much gray market. But on the other hand, like, of course, not much safety study, not much efficacy. That does not mean, those peptides are not safe. That does not mean those peptides are not, effective. And I think one of the commenters indicated that, really honed in on the fact that he himself had health issue. He himself used number of peptides list of the 7 peptides nominated uh, and discussed during the PCAC meeting, and he provided his personal experience that it actually helped him. He was bedridden. Now he could take a hike, and of course he has, like everybody else does, he has good days and bad days. Um, and just taking away these peptides from compounding pharmacy does not mean patients are not going to find a way to buy them because there's enormous green market. Um, like after the PCAN meeting, like I went to my Instagram and immediately there's like series of like peptide gray market companies, ads or whatever, and they're hiring these, influencers or content creators or whatnot to promote their products. And nobody can vouch quality of those or safety of those, where even they're getting. So I think the committee did the right thing by recommending these peptides to be added to the 503 bulk list.
Even with like, GLPs, even when they were on the shortage, so there was a very clear pathway for pharmacies to compound it. And Nicolette and I, we operate a small fulfillment pharmacy as well. And just the educational piece with some offices was so difficult because they'd reach out to us and say, well, we want this and we want that and we want retatrutide and we're, BPC and when you try to explain because obviously with our pharmacy we're very strict in sticking to the regulations of what can be in the green list of compounded and just so much of a misunderstanding of like, well, no, it comes from this great company. Like, who is this company? You know, and when you look into it, it's just maybe they have a nice website, but they have, you know, nothing behind it to represent it, you know, the safety of the actual sterility of the products that they're using. So it's so widespread. And it's obviously just been getting so much worse. So I'm hoping for sure in that reason that something is done. And another question I had for you, Day, which you know, one of the commenters kept bringing up as well, um, was is there any possibility that since we know this huge gray market exists and it's not stopping, and as you saw from your ads, they're probably going full force on it now because they're like, look, these peptides are good. Um, is there any route where potentially they could make an update where they could add these back to category one while they consider the rulemaking for the updated guidance? Because we know that's going to take like a while.
Yeah, I mean, rulemaking is going to take a while. Could be months, could be years, who knows, right? And I think there is a way, I presume, that FDA can add these peptides to category one. Okay. Now, but there's also like double standard by licensing boards in terms of enforcement. Okay. Including FDA. And this is what I was thinking the whole time because I represent providers, right? Um, again, FDA is not regulating to my eyes, not regulating those gray market. They have no jurisdiction over them. They're just watching these green marketers selling peptides, including retatrutide. I could literally go on internet right now and buy with a click of maybe at tops 5 clicks, buy retatrutide right now, and then I could get it. Of course, I don't know what's in it.
Right.
Nobody knows. Um, I don't even know whether it comes with COA or not. And then I could inject it, right? At the same time, I have clients who have been dispensing these peptides, whether BPC or not. And I know other providers, not my clients, who dispense these drugs or compounded products, including retatrutide, and are now getting um, enforced by the state authority. State authorities being either it be board of pharmacy, board of medicine, or board of nursing, and they're getting penalties and discipline, facing disciplinary action. So from my point of view, how's that even fair? While the providers are trying to source these APIs and peptides from their point of view, reputable sources, right? And then they're doing everything in their power to make sure that they're providing these compounded products in a sterile setting, and then dispensing to the patient in a safer manner, compared to gray marketers, fancy website label, some bodybuilder or influencer on a TikTok or Instagram promoting their product, selling the product directly to the patient without having to face any penalties or regulation. That's just unfair to me, and I don't think that's um, protecting the safety of the public and patients.
Who would have any sort of regulatory authority over gray market?
I'm not sure.
Mm.
I don't think. I mean, look, if I buy a gray market peptide right now, you think? I mean, FDA should have regulate. I mean, enforcement authority over it, but they're not exercising it, and I don't think they even know how to do it.
Yeah.
You can't just knock on my door, right, as a consumer, and then tell me, hey, don't buy it. I'm like, okay, and then there's millions out there. And then there
Right.
are a lot of gray marketers out there. It's so easy to get to set up a company and then source the API from wherever, from the world, whether it be China, India, or wherever it is, and then
Mhm.
start selling.
It's definitely interesting. I wonder too, I mean, there's a number of ways this can go. My mind goes to um, maybe some discretion or like not enforcing. So having a discretionary period or a non-enforcement period while the FDA is working to sort all this out in the interest of public health,
Hmm.
while they're figuring out the rulemaking. And we saw this with GLPs as well. There was enforcement discretion. So even though the shortage ended, there was kind of a tail or an off ramp. So I wonder, and even when I first learned about guidance for industries, right, and GFIs, when we looked at the prohibition on wholesaling, and that's what kind of opened the door for 503Bs to sell to our 503A pharmacies on the manufacturing scale. Guidance for industry means that the rulemaking is not complete. And from what I hear, it can take 7 years or so for the FDA to finalize that rulemaking when they put out a guidance for industry. So could something like that potentially happen here where they're not sure where it's going to land on the bulks list or maybe even category one? But in the meantime, in the interest of public health, they can exercise some enforcement discretion to allow licensed and regulated compounding pharmacies to provide these therapies for their patients.
Yes, I mean that's certainly possible, and I would definitely prefer that. Right now, the gray marketer is selling under the purview of research grade, research only, and
Yeah,
people are buying for their own research, injecting into their body. But but they're selling it as research grade, not for human use, and I believe it actually says that in the bottle or in the label or in the
yeah,
package, you know,
yeah.
from the gray marketers.
Yeah, I have friends purchasing research grade not for human use and injecting it into themselves. And as a pharmacist, that's really frightening. I saw an article that they're finding traces of fentanyl in these peptides. That could be a scare tactic, but it could be true because there's no testing requirements or anything.
Yeah.
There's no
There was
Yeah,
requirements.
exactly. Or no peptides at all. Who knows?
Right.
there was a
And mhm.
commenter during the meeting who I think she was a physician. And she brought up at least two scenarios, maybe even more, because I was a little bit in and out of one patient she had that the gray market peptide they were injecting ended up being laced with NMDA and ecstasy, and then
Yeah, right, right.
with fentanyl. So I mean, even like it's wild to even think like how are these other substances getting in? But then even if you think about, all right, ones that maybe are the substance, but they did not make them exactly the correct way, and the dangers of that and the things that can come about when you are injecting with sterile drugs, it's all just very scary. And I also another thing that just popped into my mind too, Day, was one of the committee members I think it was a committee member, was like, okay, well, if you're going to do this, then you should require that all API only comes from the US. And to me, that was just like a little bit of another alarm bell in my head to say you don't really understand the background and what happens because as we know, um, what percentage of APIs that are used, even in FDA approved drugs,
Right.
are actually made in the US. I mean, I want to say it's close to zero. Um,
Hmm.
so it was just another reason why I felt that there wasn't a full understanding of even the background of compounding really in general.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. We were having
And
some
I mean,
great questions pop up too. Sorry, someone asked if do we anticipate action by Secretary Kennedy to bypass the advisory committee, which with this administration, it can be
you never
surprising
know.
at times. So I guess
Yeah.
so if we paint out, the PCAC, that's part of the rulemaking process, right? They recommended 6 out of the 7 peptides that they reviewed. What are the possible avenues now? There's maybe an enforcement discretion, which I'm a fan of because that lets us on our pharmacy side in a regulated environment take control. Now, we need a regulated supply chain ahead of that, to be able to source compliantly and to be able to fulfill all of our requirements. There's our administration just saying, boom, these are on the bulks list or these are on category one, right? Um, it could drag out, but like you said, it's such a public health, I don't know, crisis, really? I mean, potentially,
It is. It is.
if something goes wrong. So what else could happen? And do you have a feeling or a sense? And a lot of this is unprecedented too, but we've been living in a lot of unprecedented land since COVID, really, and we never really came out of it, I feel like.
Right. I mean, in general sense, like traditional sense, there's got to be coming and rulemaking process taken by the FDA, and then they will decide the fate of these six peptides, whether to be included in the ultimately included in the bulk list or not, or provided, issue a guidance allowing the providers to safely compound and dispense these products. Or there's Kennedy effect. Um, it's certainly possible. I mean, after I forgot when it was earlier this year, he went on to that Joe Rogan podcast, and after that, my phone was blowing up. Is this does this mean that I can legally compound these products? The answer is no. Just because the secretary says something on a podcast doesn't mean that it's legal. And the same thing, here. Um, just because the six peptides have been recommended to be added to the 503A bulk list does not mean you can start compounding. And I guess it creates a little bit of more opaque. It adds a little bit of more opaqueness as to what's legal or what's not legal. And 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 I say this because, for example, pharmacies, right? Independent pharmacies, compounding pharmacies, there are under the jurisdiction of the State Board of Pharmacy. Okay. And the State Board of Pharmacies, I mean, even among them, the enforcement action, the level is different. Some states, um, they have not exercised their enforcement authority over compounding pharmacies who dispense these peptides. And some states are very aggressive. Some states issue notice of suspension right away if you have if a pharmacy dispense any of these peptides. And in some states, pharmacists, they don't like discipline the pharmacy provider, but make a note in the record that the pharmacy has research grade peptide, using it for testing purposes in the record.
Hmm. That
So,
makes
but
sense too, because it's not really a switch flip. We know of 503Bs and 503As who are procuring these APIs, technically
Mhm.
research grade APIs, but they're looking at sterility, stability, toxicity, endotoxin, all those things so that they can have their formulations ready for, they're not dispensing them, but it needs to start somewhere. And I was interested too because one of the conversations we were in recently, they were talking about just that, researching and getting their formulations ready, and I questioned, well, where are you getting this API from? Is it just black market API? What is it? And they were like, no, it's reputable. And I'm like, how? How is it reputable? Because there is no standard for that yet. They're like, well, it's from a reputable supplier. And I'm like, how can we not have them in our pharmacies, right? Yet these reputable suppliers that have all the proper licensure and everything, they can have them? Like, where's the enforcement up the chain like that?
right.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's really confusing, and and because and in terms of pharmacies, right? 503As, as Annie went over during the early part of today's webinar, you have to have USP monograph or part of FDA approved drug, or peptides is on the FDA bulk list. These six are none of them, right?
Right.
Six are still up in the air. Um, but if a pharmacy client of mine, hypothetically speaking, who, let's say, gets a complaint from a board of pharmacy and then for dispensing BPC-157, based on the recent recommendation by the committee, I think I would have more, leg to stand. And of course, it's up to the interpretation of the board, but still, I would argue that um, these products were ultimately recommended to be added to the 503A bulk list. You know, um, so, and of course, it's still it could be a losing argument, it could be a winning argument. It's 50-50 at this point. But legally speaking, pharmacies cannot or should not dispense these products.
That's a good point that to this topic, that's a good point that Jeannie and Tim have in the comments too. So Tim's been told multiple times you can't use research grade material in your formulation testing and then have it apply to the pharma grade formulation. And what I'm thinking is going to happen, and Dae, you and I talked about this a couple months ago when I was at a show. Um, what and this was a huge topic at the meeting. What are we talking about? Is it the base? Is it acetate? Is it what actual chemical structure are we talking about here and what needs to be regulated? And that even was uncertain because there's no regulation in place.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the nomenclature and the things that they were talking about because a peptide is a short chain of amino acids, right? So it's a sequence of amino acids and they have to be just like if you're back in organic chemistry lab trying to put these things together and wash them and keep them. And I wasn't great at making aspirin in organic chem. I'll just let you guys know. It was not as easy as I thought it would be. So I don't know who these yahoos stringing together these amino acids are on the peptides. I don't have a lot of trust and faith in it. But if you have a very reputable company, let's say in China, where a lot of these APIs come from, to your point earlier, Annie, you have these companies who know how to make these powders. They make it in the acetate form or they make it in a specific form. And yes, right now it's considered research grade, but when this regulatory switch flips, hopefully it'll be quick for them to have their C of A match what the requirements are. And then it can follow that supply chain. The FDA did something interesting too in creating the green list during the whole shortage of the GLPs and the GLP compounded surge to say, hey, these are the suppliers that are on the green list for semaglutide and tirzepatide. So when the bulk API powder hits the shores of the United States, we can green list them through that they're meeting all the requirements and they're properly licensed. So maybe there's a lot of work to be done for us to even be at this point, and for me to say maybe reputable API suppliers in China are making these things and we'll be able to pretty much write the regulation and help with it about what reputable, compliant API looks like. Note, we never say approved. These things are not FDA approved, and that word was getting thrown around a lot at the meeting.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why like KPV generated the relatively favorable discussion. I think some committee members viewed it as like a shorter amino acid sequence, presenting fewer theoretical concerns compared to other peptides that were being discussed during the day, 2 days. So I mean, we'll see how the FDA will react. But one thing was very clear, which is the market has already moved on. You know, um, there's a saying in the legal industry, the the law is always trying to catch up with the industry, what the industry is portraying, and I think that's what's happening here. The industry already moved on. Peptides are in the market. People are using it. It's past point of no return. So FDA, hopefully, I want the FDA to move swiftly, fast, and put out some guardrails. to protect the patients. And I think one of the committee members on day two was very passionate about the committee not trying to be a hurdle to patients who have no other options. As a physician, he really emphasized that. I mean, physicians, as you know, they're the ultimate, they should be the ultimate decision maker in recommending which therapy, which drugs are good for their patients. But at the same time, we can't have products out there with fentanyl or MDMA in it. Very serious.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I know the PCAC meeting is supposed to meet again to review the additional peptides that were taken off category 2. They're supposed to meet in February, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we'll see how that, the second PCAC meeting regarding peptides gonna play out. Um, I think there was also a difference between like day one and day two in terms of some of the arguments that the committee members were making or the experts were making surrounding the clinical efficacy and safety of the peptides.
also, there were a number of 503Bs in attendance at
Yes.
this meeting, right? And when we look at it at its core, this meeting, this move, we're talking about the 503A bulks list. So even if there was movement and all these peptides were moved over to the 503A bulks list, that does not give our 503B friends the green light to go ahead and start compounding these products. So what's your opinion on why these 503Bs were there and what does the pathway look like for them?
I mean, 503As and Bs are different, right? And some of the 503Bs who were there also had 503A compounding pharmacy. But from my point of view, I think 503Bs, I can speculate that 503Bs think that depending on how the committee, votes and reacts, it will likely impact the pathway for 503Bs.
Mm.
And who knows? Well, one of them or some of them or all of them are gearing up. They might be, gearing up for the products to be added to 503B.
Yeah. I mean, for me as a pharmacist, it makes sense to have 503Bs have access to these peptides, to have 503As have access to these peptides, because the market is so big and it's only growing bigger. 503Bs are regulated at a very intricate scale and they're made to be manufacturers. So if we really want to do the right thing by patients, we get them in with a valid patient prescriber relationship. A custom compounded medication is
Mm-hmm.
prescribed, I would say recommended, but prescribed for these patients. Um, they'll tell these patients these are not FDA approved therapies. They're compounds. They're customized for you. On the 503A side, of course, if it is on one of those lists and they are able to compound with it, the formulation is set to be customized for that patient. 503A is custom compounding for a patient. But on the 503B side, if it's a very common formulation that's big in the market, which that's what we're already seeing with these individual peptides and even these stacks, if the 503Bs can manufacture them at scale, it makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, certainly different standards between 503A and 503B. Certainly different. But it was interesting to see them at the PCAC meeting.
There's definitely a lot of folks, I'm sure, blowing up your phone day, a lot of investors in this space, a lot of interest because if you look at the dollars, it's a multi-billion dollar market and it's only getting
Yes.
bigger. So
Yes. I mean, in terms of clientele, it definitely expanded over the course of year or two. The types are different, right? Um,
mhm.
compounding pharmacies, 503As, 503Bs, but also telemedicine platforms, telemedicine marketers, or straight up investors, private equities. Um, a lot of money in the industry, a lot of
Yeah.
money. It's very exciting. Not because it's a lot of money, but it's because it's giving people access to future. Like if we talk to independent pharmacy owners, they are, negative revenue on every single claim that is being paid by legacy top three PBMs. 99% of times they lose money on brand products, brand claims. They make a little bit of money on the generic claims, so it's a volume practice. And all of a sudden, GLP-1 gave them, some of them, well, good number of them, an opportunity for a future. And
Yeah.
this peptide, if if some, all of them, the six of them, actually gets added to the 538 bulk list, it's going to be astronomical.
Yeah.
So I'm excited.
I agree. Good. I know we are too, and that's a perfect segue into the peptide strategies course. So we've been working on a project here at Atrium24. We work with over 250 pharmacies across the country with our sales enablement software, Dotti, and our it's a CRM, and we have an Atrium24 GPO where we connect with 503A pharmacies to provide central fill services for our pharmacies and provide those connections. And we work with 503Bs. Um, the whole point being just to analyze the pharmacy's data, create marketing resources and things to help you find and vet places to work with, procure the product, get the word out to your patients, to your prescribers, and then utilize all the data analytics to track and put a CRM and put notes and just like really manage your book of business and grow your book of business like pharma does. So we've been getting a lot of questions about, hey, these peptides, I didn't learn about them in pharmacy school. What do I need to know about them? Is there training that you guys recommend out in the industry that I could go learn about? And there are some. So Annie and I have been on a big adventure, a really deep dive. Um, Me always on the regulatory side and on the pharmacy owner and implementation and business aspect, and then Annie certainly on the clinical pharmacist aspect, about how do we bring these into our pharmacy? How do we learn about these peptides ourselves? How do we train our teams on them? How do we talk to patients and prescribers about them? And then how do we operationalize them inside of our business once the regulatory channels show that we're able to do so? So, Annie, I know this is your baby. Do you want to let them know what we're working on and what's coming soon?
Yeah, it's certainly been a labor of love so far and a lot of work that's gone into it. But like you said, Nicolette, there isn't really anything that we could find really geared towards pharmacists or pharmacy technicians in understanding these peptides. Because even prior to 2023, when some compounding pharmacies, were making and selling these, they were kind of more separated into these real wellness-based pharmacies. And as Dae said, as the GLPs came along and we saw the great opportunities we could provide really great drugs to our patients through the um, compounded drugs, I think now we have so many more pharmacies, especially independent pharmacies, that are really interested in these, but it is hard to know, clinically about these peptides. So there is a lot of research that needs to go into it. And so with this training that we are putting out, it's going to end up being two modules. And the first one really is very clinically based. So in this first module, we're going to review peptide fundamentals. What are peptides? How do they function in the body? Kind of the history of them. Because peptides it's such a buzzword now. And some people may be a little bit worried about it. Maybe we don't have that much information, but insulin is a peptide that was first started to be used in 1920s, I believe. And there's tons of peptides that are produced naturally within the body. And then I think there's actually close to 100 that even have FDA approval. So peptides are not new. It's kind of these peptides in the wellness space that are not FDA approved at the moment. So there's not that much information if you are just looking at it right now from a training perspective. So we're really looking to fill that gap. So we're going to go through those fundamentals. Nicolette's going to cover the regulatory considerations. So it's great you're here today, kind of learning the basis of what that means. But what we plan to do is offer you tools to be able to evaluate in the future. So as these peptides go through different regulatory review, we're going to give you that basis so that you can evaluate it yourself in continuation. In the introductory module, we're also going to talk about lifestyle factors. So how you can really help your patients. And, it's not this peptide's going to fix everything for you if you're living a life that is not wellness focused. So some of those things that can help when you're on these therapies. And then we're going to go through probably the biggest piece that is going to be so beneficial for pharmacists and technicians is we're going to review the most common peptides, including all of the ones that were reviewed in PCAC a couple of days ago, and then also the ones that are going to be coming up in February. We are going to break it down into therapeutic categories, so it kind of makes it a little bit easier for you to understand and place these together and kind of look at what would be good for which patients. So we're going to go through regenerative medicine, growth hormone and body composition, weight management and metabolic health, neurology and cognitive health, immune health, sexual health and fertility, and then longevity and aging. And then, for each of those categories, we're going to review the proposed mechanisms of action, how they've been used historically, patient population considerations. So it's going to be a very good structured overview for you and really a lot easier to understand than trying to do it on your own, because there is a lot out there. And as I say a lot with things like AI, although we love it, but things like large language models, there's a lot of garbage in, garbage out. So if you're trying to do it on your own and you're not looking at, at least the research that's been done in animal models and actual experience, you end up getting a lot of that garbage out too, which can be a little bit unsafe. So that's what we're going to cover in Module 1. We're looking at it to be about 6 lectures. And then we are going to also have a Module 2, which we are going to release later on. And this part is really going to be the implementation piece. So we're going to go through, proper sourcing. How do you know you're getting it from the right place? Vetting your suppliers. We're going to go through, I think on the next slide, it might even give you some more information. But also some pharmacies who maybe haven't dived in yet to the 503B to 503A model or don't understand how the central fill model works. Because of course we have so many amazing independent pharmacies out there who can really help service patients, but maybe they're not sterile compounding. So this is a space where if you're not familiar, there are a lot of good options of how you can get sterile products to your patients in your pharmacy. So we'll go through those models and how they actually work in practice. We're going to go through how you can build compliant partnerships with clinics. So sometimes they want to set up, since the GLPs came around, they kind of want to set it up in a different way versus traditional, here's a prescription, you take it to whichever pharmacy you want. We're going to go through a little bit about patient education and marketing. Of course, we'll cover the things, that you'll want to stay away from and maybe tips of how you can really promote that. In addition, we'll talk about telemedicine workflows. So that's another thing that you can also implement into your independent pharmacies. And then complementary programs. So as these peptides are really kind of wellness focused in general, there's so many options of additional things that you can add in, your NAD, maybe some really good vitamin lines, maybe some new types of testing that you can offer. There's just the options are endless. So we're going to go through all of those things. And really the overarching goal of it is to provide you with that clinical basis. So you're not overwhelmed with trying to actually give good information to your patients and making sure you're doing the right thing. And then the second piece is going to be that implementation piece, where if maybe you haven't started with it, or maybe you need to ramp it up in your pharmacy, how can you do that? Even if you aren't a sterile compounding pharmacy. And even if you are sterile, I'd probably say, at least module one is probably going to be really beneficial for your pharmacist and for your team. So we are finally ready to launch the pre-sale. We are working on CE accreditation with it as well. So we're kind of working with that timeline. But that would be great as well. So for your time, you can also, get those CE credits as a pharmacist and a pharmacy technician, which we have also not seen for any of the training that's out there. There are some extensive training programs which can be really good, but really honestly are focused more on prescribers. Um, so we want to offer something that gives you what you need without being too overwhelming. So we are launching our pre-sale today. So if you want, you can scan that QR code on there. We are offering a pretty great discount now during this pre-sale period. So the promo code we have if you scan the QR code, it will take you to the link, but the promo code, I'm sure, Tiffany will send it out in an email later if you forget, but Peptide 20 is going to save you an additional 20%. And then the course will drop by 9/1, and we'll give you updated information on that with module 2 slotted to come in after that.
Yeah, thanks, Annie. I know that's linear pharmacists and myself how I like to look at things. Annie and I have gone through um, some of the clinical trainings that are available out there now, and they're wonderful. I'll call out A4M. We went through the peptide um, trainings there with A4M. Great trainings, 36 CE hours. It's not CE for pharmacists, and it's geared toward medical practitioners. Still very informative, educational, wonderful. SSRP and Dr. David Seeds has a lot of great information. There's a ton of great information out there, a lot of books. And we want more. We want that kind of pharmacy school training, like Annie said, where we present it as pharmacist to pharmacist linearly about these peptides, what we know, what's in the evidence and research right now. So really excited to launch that. Um, and then, as you can imagine, and make sure you're doing Peptide 20 in all caps.
Yes, that's what I was going
It's
to.
yeah, it's
It is
case
case
sensitive. I don't
sensitive.
know why. Yeah.
Yeah, I
So
should have.
all caps, like you're really excited. Um, Peptide 20. So now, Day, I'm sure we're making your blood pressure increase because a lot of things that we talked about were very regulatory, like complex issues. So when I talk through the regulatory issues or how to set this up in your business, it's always from a pharmacist perspective, and we always give you the links. So this is the FDA link to check. This is where you can find the direct from the horse's mouth, right? Direct from the FDA, click the links, like make sure that you, instead of just taking Nicolette's word for it or Annie's word for it, make sure that you're able to have references and have links for everything, especially if you're going to implement it into your business. And, that we all have to comply by the FDA's regulations and our state boards, right? And so, always I would, as you're putting your business plan together, as you're looking to get into peptides when it's time, as you're looking to prep this, talk to a healthcare attorney. Here's Dae's information. Dae is really well versed on this, of course, and really helpful. A lot of our pharmacies work with him. So I would encourage you to reach out to Dae. Small pharmacies, you might not have a big legal budget. I wouldn't let that stop you because it would be much more expensive and detrimental to your business if you did not pass it through legal counsel and do something in the wrong way. So this is such a huge opportunity for all of us. And now is the time to get educated and to start to build out your business plan, and just to make sure that you have legal bless it because each state is a lot of fun and a lot of different and constantly changing. Um, so that's that information there. We're really excited to continue. I'm hoping to hear some breaking news from the FDA. Maybe that's coming, and maybe it'll be in our favor because honestly, at the end of the day, I believe that's what's best for patient care as well. Of course, I want this from a business perspective. I want to be able to bring these peptides into our businesses, but as well, and it's better for patient care. So that's what we all really want to focus on.
Yeah. And I think the PCAC vote was such a good nod in the direction that we hope everything moves. And just from talking with people in the industry, I think a lot of people feel very positive that this will move, with even potential to move a little bit quicker than we've seen in the past. So I would say yes, we've been talking about it, since we knew the peptides were going to be taken off of the list. And we've been saying, you should probably start getting educated now because your patients are going to start asking you about it. So I would say that's probably the best first step for pharmacies who are interested in it. Even if you are not planning to do, any sort of program, you really just need to know about these drugs. And there's not really a pathway that we've seen so far that's going to contain all of that knowledge for you and the research-based information. So we're excited
Yep.
about it.
Yeah, very excited. And I anticipate these changes are going to keep coming. So we're really happy to get it through the CE accreditation process. Anything that we can get accredited, we will, because we want as many peer eyes on this as possible. So we may start pulling in. We had somebody comment that he may be a subject matter expert. And so as this grows, we definitely want to pull folks in and just really build a community where we have just reputable word and just building this out for pharmacists, right? So that we can really take ownership of this market and provide um, safe access for these therapies to our patients.
Yep. And you got to be educated. Everybody needs to be educated before they get into this peptide business or even start talking about peptides. There will be FDA action. There will be Board of Pharmacy actions or reactions to the PCAC meeting.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for spending the time with us. And thank you, Dae, for joining us today. Thanks, Annie, for all your hard work on this. I know it's quite the project. So it's a great time to be in pharmacy. I know there's a lot of opportunity for us and there's a lot of patients that we can help. Um, so thank you guys so much.
All right. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.